Red Zone, episode 10. We are back. Huge week of football, both ahead of us and behind us, to be fair. Episode's going to be coming out a little late, but we work with it. We make it happen, and I think actually the timing of the episode might turn out to be a bit of a fortuitous thing, because I'm going to be getting a relatively late preview for the next round, which is, a good thing. Because typically it's so early in the week, I don't want to do previews, and there's almost too many games, but we've gotten to the point in the postseason where I think there's both a good amount of games. I'm doing the episode at a good point in the week that I'm going to do both the recaps from last week and then the previews this week. And I'm excited. I think it should be a good episode because of that. I'm very excited for it. So let's get started. The first game that I wanted to talk about from last week was Bengals-Bills. This game really did not go how I expected it to, if I'm going to be totally honest. I thought this was going to be a much more competitive game, and that's not just me. Obviously, there were a lot of people going into this round that I think thought maybe this was the most exciting matchup. You had Joe Burrow, Josh Allen. You had the incredible wide receivers in Diggs and Chase and T. Higgins and Gabe Davis and Tyler Boyd. You had a ton of talent there, and you had Joe Mixon running the ball. So that Cincinnati has all these weapons. Buffalo's got some weapons too, very exciting offensively. The Bills, number 2 seed, Bengals number 3 seed. Obviously the game with Damar Hamlin that, wasn't particularly, aggressive or anything, but not getting to play a game when two teams are directly competing with each other, that's going to let it stew a little bit more. And so people were getting really excited for this game, myself included. And instead, we got a pretty comfortable win for the Bengals, right? The score at the end of the first quarter was 14-0. At the half, it was 17-7. The closest game we ever really had past the first 5 minutes was mid-third quarter. The Bills had just scored a field goal and were down 7. But you felt like they really needed to do more there. Right after that, the Bengals come back. They score a touchdown on their next drive, and then that was it. They score a field goal on their next drive after that, and then they're up 17 in the fourth, and the game's all but over. They've got a 98% chance to win the game at that point. So, the Bills, they let this game get away from them early, and I don't think you could afford to do that in a game where both these teams are really so good. Joe Burrow was very cool, and no pun intended, but he was so calm, so proficient in the areas that we have come to expect him to be. His pocket presence, his decision making, his vision were all on point, even in the crazy elements that they were playing. And Joe is someone from Ohio. He's not someone who's scared to play in the weather, but to see him perform like that, outperform Josh Allen in those elements that Josh Allen's come to be used to, that was impressive stuff from Joe, no doubt. And we've all come to be accustomed to Burrow impressing us, so maybe nothing that'll be surprising too many people. But there were some key things that I noticed early. Josh Allen didn't have the touch that day. He is a really great quarterback. He picked it up in the second half, although, not enough and too late. But he just didn't have the precision. He wasn't flawless decision making like Joe was. It was just he was outmatched on the day, and he overthrew Diggs on a big play early. He had the interception as well, and it was just no touchdowns, lower completion percentage than Burrow. It was a rough performance from Josh Allen for sure. And I think that's a bit of a blow to a lot of the people who spent the year arguing that Josh Allen was on the level of Patrick Mahomes, which he isn't, to be clear. Though he is a great quarterback, top 5 without doubt in the NFL, but Patrick Mahomes is on his own level. Let's just be real. I think deep down we all know that. And so, the production from Burrow was nice, but something that I think what truly changed the game in regards to being something that the Bengals had and maybe didn't expect, and something the Bills had none of, was the consistent rushing threat of Joe Mixon, who went 20 carries for 105 and a touchdown. Just pounding on the Bills all game, getting you that 4.5, 5 yards per carry throughout the game as he was playing. And it never fluctuated too far from that, but he was just giving you consistent yards. He's so tough, very strong back. He was huge throughout the game. Chase performing in the snow was good to see. Not his greatest game statistically. 5 catches, 61 yards, and a touchdown. Had a touchdown that should have been confirmed, overturned. It was a really crazy decision. But Jamar Chase is him. We all know that. That's not something that is going to come as a surprise to people from Louisiana, LSU fans, Bengals fans. Jamar Chase, one of the best receivers in the league. Just crazy to see him perform like that in the elements, because unlike Joe, he will not have been that used to that. He's played in Cincinnati, which, gets a little cold. It's not Buffalo. It's not Buffalo. And Baton Rouge sure as hell isn't Buffalo. So, I liked him. I liked seeing that. I don't know. It just warmed my heart a bit. Because Burrow, I sort of expected, but deep down, I don't know. Chase, the guy who had some stupid concerns previously with his hand security and being from the South, I thought maybe that would give him trouble, but he was great. He was great. The Bengals were just good everywhere. Their defense performed. Their offensive line performed. Those would have been the things you were worried about before the game for sure. Would have been, how are they going to consistently stop the Bills, and then how are they going to protect Joe Burrow with the offensive line injuries they had? They answered those problems easily. They were very comfortable in every facet of the game. And that spoke a lot to me, because I thought if the Bengals won this game, it'd probably just be that they outscored them by, in a 30-point game or a high 20-point game, maybe because of the elements. But they were great offensively considering the circumstance, I think, and they were really good defensively too. Great performance. I mean, I'm someone who believed in the Bengals. I think I had them in the AFC Championship game, but this took it up a notch to the point where I'm like, they were a better team than the Bills. They just were. And now, I've got a really tough, conflict going in my head, whether I'm thinking, are the Bengals going to take this, or the Chiefs going to take it? I think the AFC Championship is going to be interesting. Now, though the scores were pretty similar for most of the game, the Chiefs really were a lot less comfortable in their win over the Jaguars. They let it get closer late. They weren't as easily separated throughout the game. Before I talk about, how I think the Chiefs won the game, I just want to say what I really, truly came to enjoy this Jaguars team throughout the season. They're one of my favorite teams in the NFL that aren't the Saints. I love Doug Peterson and the decisions he's courageous enough to make. He understands the context and the momentum of games so well, I think, in a way that a lot of other coaches have consistently shown they don't. It's hard to be a good coaching mind and also a good decision maker. It's rare to see both of those. I think he is. And I think his one season turnaround of the Jaguars is truly impressive because they were competing. Let's get this straight. They were competing to beat the Chiefs here. They could have won this game if they had just been a little more clutch, understood the situation a bit better, been a bit more consistent. But still, I think what they did, there's a lot to be happy with. Now, the best thing was just opening the game up with an onside kick. How badass is that? Man, that's something that, like, I love an unexpected onside kick. I think I always will just because of how the Saints won their Super Bowl versus the Colts. And that is always one of my favorite memories and one of the most badass coaching decisions I've ever seen. So starting the game off with an onside kick and then winning it is just so cool. And I've got so much admiration for that. I think it was so awesome. And so even though they didn't actually score on that drive, they just ended up punting it. I really loved that. I thought that said a lot about the mindset of the Jaguars from the beginning. And so the Jaguars went punch for punch in the first quarter, 7-7 game. And then we get a really crazy second quarter where it looks like the Chiefs are going to start pulling away, right? They get up 17-7 courtesy of a Kelsey TD and a Butker field goal. And so this is the moment when you really start to think maybe the Chiefs are going to pull away, right? And so we get something truly crazy after that. The Jaguars go on a really quick drive, but ultimately end a little short of what they wanted. They have to kick a field goal. They go down 17-10. It's 27 seconds left in the second quarter. They kick the ball off. The Chiefs recover it. And then they fumble the ball. And so the Jaguars just instantly get into field goal range. And they leave points on the board. Riley Patterson misses his second field goal of the game. Oh, God. Riley Patterson made me want to pull my hair out watching this game. That's 6 points left on the board already for the Jaguars. This game could be 17-13. Now it's 17 or 17-16. Now it's 17-10. But still fine for the Jaguars, and they showed some heart throughout, really. I really like this team. I think I'm going to watch a lot of this team. I love E10. I love Lawrence. I love the Evan Engram resurgence arc. You know, there's so many weird things about how this team works and has become so good so quickly that I'm so excited about. Trevor Lawrence is like one of, if not my favorite quarterback in the NFL to watch. I absolutely love watching him play football. 24-39, 217, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Wasn't perfect, you know, but some of the individual throws he made were unreal. Just the placement on some of the short throws. He had a throw on a 4th and 2 slant that was just inch perfect for Zay Jones. He was maybe the most impressive thing on the field for me, even though the Jaguars lost. Every time I've come to watch Trevor Lawrence towards the end of this season, I've been amazed, except for the first quarter against the Chargers. Disclaimer. Well, to be fair, I was amazed, but in a different way. Maybe not so positive of a manner. But despite, you know, a great effort from the Jaguars to come back in the fourth quarter, brought it to 20-27, brought it to 17-20 before that, but they just could not close the gap enough, and they fall 27-20 to a Chiefs team who lost Patrick Mahomes in the second quarter. They lost Patrick Mahomes, and he came back in the second half. He was a bit hobbled. He didn't play poorly. He wasn't awful, but his mobility is undeniably a large part of his game. He's one of the most shifty, tricky quarterbacks to tackle when he's scrambling. He makes amazing throws on the run constantly. So losing the mobility for a quarterback like that could be a huge factor. Even if he was able to come back for the second half of the game, you could tell it was hampering him. You could tell it was hurting him. So that's going to be a huge factor going in to the Bengals-Chiefs game, really. And I think that's going to be a big factor in who I'm expecting to win. You know, I just don't think the Chiefs are maybe good enough to beat the Bengals with hampered Mahomes. I think he needs to be like 90% plus for them to win, I guess would basically be how I'd put it. But we can talk about that matchup. And this matchup is starting to become sort of the de facto Patriots cults of the mid-aughts and the late-aughts. The Bengals and the Chiefs have come to be the two alphas in the AFC recently. They've been to the last 3 Super Bowls. They are, you know, it's getting to the point where it feels like if the Bengals win this game, it's like these are the two best. These are the two future quarterbacks who are going to be dominating. But the Bengals would have a huge edge recently since the emergence of Joe Burrow. Now, the spread for this game, and this is really surprising given the game is at the Chiefs. The Bengals are a 1.5 point favorite, which is, you know, wow, that's saying something. Now, you can really, there are a few factors that once you dive into them, it really makes sense and it's not crazy. But it is something that I don't think people would have expected going into the season or the postseason for the Chiefs to be a 1.5 point dog in their own stadium. And look, there are a couple reasons why. The two big reasons why this is happening. Bengals are 3-0 in their last 3 games versus the Chiefs over the last 2 seasons. One in each of the regular seasons and then one in the playoffs last year that sent them to the Super Bowl. The Bengals are confident. You heard Mike Hilton talking about Burrowhead when they were beating the Bills. They're confident. I almost wonder if they're too confident because they know they own the Chiefs as of late, and they know they can beat them already. This is a position that the Bengals got to faster than I think anybody expected. I don't know if anybody expected them to be a championship game favorite in just a couple years after drafting Joe Burrow. It's a meteoric ascension, something that is really, really impressive on behalf of the players and the coaching and the organization. And they've come to subvert a lot of narratives that I think people thought they were 100% right about and thought they had set in stone regarding the Cincinnati Bengals. And Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and everybody else have turned that all around in just a couple seasons. Now, the Mahomes ankle injury, as I said, I think that is a huge factor as well. I'm obviously not alone when you look at the line. I wonder how much it could affect him because I think he doesn't have to be 100% for the Chiefs to win this. I don't think he does. I think the Chiefs are a really good team. I think they could, possibly beat the Bengals without, him being 100%. But there is a threshold that's up there, maybe 85, maybe 90, where you need him to be able to be himself and to perform at that high level that we have all come to expect from Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. This is getting to be such a legendary matchup, and they've only played competitive games for the last couple years. What a narrative it would become to be to if the Bengals are able to beat them again, go 4-0 in their last 2 seasons against the Chiefs would be really something special. Now, a couple factors that I expect to contribute to the team I'm expecting to win. I think the Bengals O-line has really shown in the past couple weeks that even with the injuries they've sustained that have taken out 3 of their starters, their O-line is still in a lot better of a spot than it was last year. They allowed 1 sack versus the Bills last week. Joe Mixon rushed for over 100 yards. The O-line performed in some really, really daunting conditions where it was probably obvious the Bengals weren't going to be able to air it out all day. And then they tried to, and they also ran the ball. So they were good all around the board. Mixon and the O-line cooked. That is going to be a huge part of why I'm expecting the Bengals to win this. The other one, Jamar Chase has absolutely dominated the Chiefs over his career. In the last 3 games the Chiefs and Bengals have played, he has 417 yards. That is 3rd most all-time in a 3-game stretch versus the Chiefs, behind Lance Allsworth twice, which I thought was an amazing stat. He had a 460 and a 480-yard stretch in the 60s, which is unbelievably impressive. But Jamar Chase 3rd, one of only 4 guys to get over 400 in 3 games against the Chiefs. I'm expecting the Bengals to take this one, as I said, and I'm expecting it to be not comfortable for the Bengals, but in the end, I'm expecting them to separate themselves by more than, 3 points, maybe 7 or 10 points, that they're able to separate themselves by and get this win. I just think that the confidence level for the Bengals is such a huge plus. I think Burrow being fully healthy is such a huge plus. I think Mixon and Chase are in great form. Chase has absolutely dominated the Chiefs in the past. I wouldn't be surprised if the Chiefs come out and win this game. I know they can, but it's hard for me to look at all the facts and not take the Bengals, which is what a crazy thing to say in the AFC Championship game. The 49ers outlasted the Cowboys. This one was a crazy game, really. This was not one that I expected to be as low scoring as it was, even though both teams had good defenses. If someone would have told me that, I wouldn't have called them crazy, but I just expected this to be a little bit more of a shootout. And what we got was an ultra close back and forth defensive thriller. But you always thought, at least I did, that the 49ers were probably going to take it, that they probably had the edge. And they really, they managed to push themselves over the line. In this case, Dak Prescott was the difference here, I would say. He too many interceptions. You can't be an elite quarterback and play like he did that day. Dak Prescott, 23 of 37 for 206 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 picks. Just the 2 interceptions were so brutal in his own territory. You just couldn't afford them at the time. Another disappointing end to the season for Dak Prescott. I think we know what Dak Prescott is at this point in his career. He's a good, not great quarterback who has never been great enough to get it done in the most important moments. He's a fine quarterback, but he is not in that upper echelon. Now, Dalton Schultz is someone who is really stupid, who's not getting enough flack for some of the stupid things that he did in this game. The first one was inconsequential, so I'll preface it with the fact that the first one didn't matter. On the first touchdown of the game, the Cowboys get a passing touchdown to Dalton Schultz, and he cuts directly into the defender despite having 5+ yards of open space towards the pylon for a touchdown, makes contact 3 yards before the line, and barely falls in. A crazy, crazy path to the end zone that he just managed to make happen because he's a giant human. But there are a couple that we'll get to later. Our hero, Dalton Schultz, was not done for the game. Now, Brent Maher, oh my God. What happened? Brent Maher was one of the best, maybe not one of the best, but one of the most consistently reliable kickers for such a long time. He makes 2 field goals today, and that was huge. It was huge that he bounced back and made 2 field goals, but he still missed the extra point on their touchdown to Dalton Schultz. He is a head case. I really wonder what Jerry Jones and the Cowboys are going to do with Maher next year, because that's such an interesting spot where that wouldn't have even been a second thought going into the postseason, and now it's a huge question. Can you rely on this guy for the future? I feel it's pretty obvious that you can't. But it's also just crazy for it to come crashing down in just a handful of games. That's not something that really I think anybody was prepared for. Brock Purdy got it done, though. It wasn't perfect. 19 of 29, 214, no touchdowns, no picks. It wasn't a great game, but he got it done. He made some plays that they needed him to make. That's what they need from him. That's what they've gotten from him. Sometimes they get more, but that is what they have always gotten from Purdy since they've started playing, and that's why they've been so good lately with him as the starter. It was a huge contrast seeing how someone who my expectations for had been so low when they were drafted, having watched him in college, compared to someone who I have come to want to expect more from in Dak, and just seeing how polar opposites they were in this game. Dak being so disappointing and Purdy being so impressive. I thought it was really, really good stuff. Narratively, like a very interesting dynamic. Man, also, this isn't like super relevant to, you know, the flow of the game, although it did happen on a scoring drive. But George Kittle made an unbelievable catch in this game. Like, one of the best catches I've seen in years, where he reaches out, tries to spear the ball with one hand, manages to tip it again, then as he's reaching out for it, grab it just before the defender gets there, pull it in. They missed him entirely, and he gets a few more yards. Oh, man, Kittle is such a special player. Holy hell, it's so nice to see someone who's good at getting him the ball and doesn't completely ignore him and has some sort of passing talent, so you don't just have to watch him be wasted game after game. It's so great to see him in his in his element performing. Obviously not in any elephants. But yeah, the Kittle performance was great. He had a great game overall. It wasn't just that. 5 catches, 95 yards. Him and CeeDee Lamb really separated themselves as receiving threats in this game. Nobody else was close to them. But there was another moment. There were a couple bozo moments that we're not going to forget about. The first from the Cowboys. Oh my God. This one is actually a bit inexplicable to me, and I'm not totally sure why it happened, but I do think that it is kind of hilarious. Kevontae Turpin, who is a pretty good returner. He's a good returner. He had a long of 44. He had 30-yard average today. Not bad. Historically, the Cowboys look at him as a very valuable returner. Kevontae Turpin, on a chance to tie the game, has a situation where he has a blocker in front of him, then a defender in front of him, and then a kicker just feet to the left of that defender. So he's basically got 1 point that he needs to worry about. And he can either cut inside, go left, and maybe risk being caught by the guy behind him, though it would get him a few more yards, and it would definitely be a lot safer than running directly into the two defenders. And he also had a chance to run it wide and try and beat the guys for the angles, which I think that would have worked and would have been a touchdown easily. Now, he decided, Kevontae Turpin looked this situation in the eyes. He focused intently and thought about what the best possible solution for this situation was and ran directly straight into both defenders. And it didn't work, and he got tackled. And that's something that you would expect when you do something like that. Normally, if you do run directly into two defenders, typically they will tackle you in the sport of football and bring you down. And so Kevontae Turpin actually had the gall to celebrate this blown touchdown right after, which is one of the most perfect summations of the absolutely chaotic failure that the Cowboys have been, even in their recent contending years. They just don't know how to be a great team. They know how to be a good team. They just don't know how to be a great team. And another example, Dalton Schultz, we didn't forget about you, buddy. On the last drive of the game, Dalton Schultz has two of the greatest bozo moments I've seen in recent NFL history. The first a bit more excusable, though still crazy. The Cowboys get the ball back with just a matter of seconds left on the clock. I don't know the exact count, but it was well under a minute. The first play is a quick out to get about 15 yards to Dalton Schultz, since obviously the 49ers are allowing them to have space. So little time left, still up 7. Dalton Schultz walks towards the sideline, allows himself to get hit backwards, and gets knocked backwards out of bounds so that the clock is still running. So he wastes 15 valuable seconds. Guess what he does the next play? He is wide open on the sideline. A great decision by Prescott to lead him and get a ton of yardage, to cut it out and get them to almost midfield. He has plenty of time, plenty of space. He only drags 1 foot, and it's incomplete. And it's just unbelievable, because they could have been in a legitimately threatening position if Dalton Schultz had decided to not have two of the dumbest decisions in all of football this season. And he just had them back to back. What a crazy end to the game. Just some truly wild stuff. Not to mention the nightmare that was the Cowboys' last play, with Zeke getting blown up as the center and them trying to do an elaborate series of sweeps and laterals. Just what a joke for the Cowboys, who once again proved they're not good enough to quite make that extra step. They're not. Now the Eagles were good enough to prove they were ready to take that next step. The Eagles absolutely pummeled the Giants. This was a game that was not nearly as close as the score seems. 48-22 does not do this game justice. This was a tailor-made ass beating, and the Giants fit the boot perfectly. They laid down. It was actually unbelievable how quickly the Eagles went up 24-0 or 24-7. It 21-0, then 24-7, then 27-7. It was really some impressive stuff. Obviously the better team. You know, this was just such an 28-0. Sorry, 28-0, then 28-7. My bad. But yeah, just an absolute destruction for the Eagles, who made it look so easy. They didn't even have to try. Their offensive numbers aren't even that good because they got them all early and they just cruised to the end. Just such an easy win for the Eagles. This is not one that I'm dying to talk about much, to be completely honest. Daniel Jones came back to earth exactly as I think I and many others said he would. And that's not exactly something I deserve applause for. It's just something that I think everybody knew would happen and then did. So, you know, it's nothing crazy. But honestly, I'm just going to be real. We are not talking about this game. This is a boring game. I'm not going to fake and stretch this out and try and talk about some stuff that nobody cares about. This was a beatdown. The Eagles showed why they are a far, 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 far better team. And they won 38-7 in the most comfortable game of this round by far. Now, this was the matchup in the NFC that we have all been preparing ourselves for pretty much the second half of the season. I think it's been very obvious. These are the two teams that have separated themselves and made themselves look like the favorites for most of the season. These are two teams that are top 6 on both sides of the ball in the NFL. These are two teams that are well coached, well rounded, and both teams that would be worthy Super Bowl winners. And they just happen to be playing each other in the round prior. The Eagles actually find themselves, though, as the 2.5 point favorites, which is not something that I thought it was a bit unexpected. I don't know. I thought that the consensus among sharps and maybe the media was that the 49ers were a slightly more preferred team. But the edge this season for home field has been closer to 2 or 1.5, and the Eagles are a 2.5 point favorite. So it seems as if the Eagles are a slight favorite, which I think is fair. It makes sense. And they are the number 1 seed, so you got to give them their respect. With that said, very close throughout the season. The 49ers had a great second half of the season. The Eagles had an amazing first half. Both teams look like they're now at their best. They're playing amazing. So these are two really great teams that have just been on a collision course. Now, the difference between these two teams, even though they are both very well-rounded, I do not trust first-year starter, second half season emergence Brock Purdy to lead a team like I trust MVP contender, consistent threat throughout the entire season, Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is an echelon above Brock Purdy at this point in their careers. He's someone who I expect to be a consistent playmaking threat, changing games, providing issues that teams are not ready to solve for. Purdy does not put that same fear in, even if he's had what has been a very impressive season from him. Let's be 100% clear there. That's not what I'm trying to argue. But I think most would agree that there's also a unique threat in Jalen Hurts compared to Brock Purdy. Now, Brock Purdy has been great since he's played. An 80.2 QBR, a 9.2 yards per attempt since he started playing, which is first in the NFL. So he's got some really good underlying stats. He's when you look at his efficiency, it's been great. Now here is the issue for Brock Purdy. The Eagles defense is first in opposition QBR. They are third in opposition yards per attempt. And Brock Purdy last week showed some signs of him being a bit weaker versus the pass rush. It was his lowest completion percentage versus pass rushing under pressure through this season at just under 40%. That won't cut it versus the Eagles. And the Eagles have a uniquely strong pass defense. They are going to give you a lot worse than the Cowboys can. Hassan Reddick has 17 and a half sacks. You got Fletcher Cox, too. You also have a really, really strong secondary with Darius Slay, James Bradbury, C.J. Gardner-Johnson. So you've got some real talent in that Eagles secondary and their pass rush. They, I think, will provide some unique issues for Brock Purdy that he has not experienced this early in his NFL career. I think that the Eagles are just a bit better poised to take advantage of the weaknesses of the 49ers. So I think that is why I am expecting the Eagles to take this game something like 24-17, maybe. I expect it to be very balanced. I think it'll be very close. Both teams are so good on both sides of the ball. It's inarguable how scary these two teams are. But in the end, I think I expect the Eagles to eke it out, and I'm expecting an Eagles-Bengals Super Bowl this year, which, would be very, very exciting. The New Orleans Pelicans are struggling, man. They have now lost 6 straight games. And there's not... Look, I still don't think this team is anywhere close to where they can be or where they'll finish. So I don't want to talk about this for too extended of a period of time. But it is disappointing to see how big of a gap there is between where this team can be when they're healthy, which we've seen so little of, and where it is now, and the way that this has just absolutely ravaged the season. Now over 8 games back on the first... Now over 8 games back on the first seed. It's a very tough indictment of the position the Pelicans are in. It's just sad. It's not something you want to see. And I just want this team to be great. I know they can be. They don't even have to be fully healthy. That's the thing, is this team doesn't even have to be fully healthy to be a great team. They just need something better than the worst injury luck imaginable. And they just can't get anything better than that. Oh, it's such a shame. Now look, there are a couple positives. I'd be remiss if I did not mention the positives for the Pelicans at this point in the season. There are 2 primary ones. Brandon Ingram is back. Brandon Ingram made his return in our last game against the Wolves. We lost, and he was horrendous. He had his worst game of the season to this point, which is fair and expected. And if you clown on BI, I will be on your ass, because it's his first game back after a 3-month-long injury. He's bound to play. He could have that game even when he is healthy. When it's his first game back off an injury, you cut him some slack, especially when he's an absolute hero for this franchise, for what he's done and what we need him to do until Zion gets back, because we really are going to need some help until that happens. The other big thing, speaking of Zion, is Zion Williamson is an NBA All-Star starter now. And this time, it's the first time without him needing an injury to get into the starting lineup, because he's been an all-star starter before, but he was a starter reserve where he only ended up starting because Kevin Durant got injured before the All-Star game. This time, in his second appearance to the All-Star game, he was voted as a starter alongside Nikola Jokic, LeBron James, Luka Doncic, and Steph Curry. On the other side, you had Jason Tatum, KD, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Donovan Mitchell, and Kyrie Irving. So some very good teams on both sides. And a very exciting bit, something I'm excited about at least, is the idea that they're going to be doing the drafts right before the game. So it's not going to be a pre-taped TV segment. It's going to be in the moment, pickup style. Who do you want on your team? Let's make the chemistry happen on the way. I think that is such a good idea. And one of the first good new ideas that the NBA has had recently, when I think a lot of their other stuff has been kind of forced and kind of pointless and maybe not nearly as exciting. Whereas something like this, it just makes sense. It's a small change that just makes more sense. It's more exciting. It provides more intrigue and spectacle. And I think there's no way you can't get excited about that. I'm interested to see where Zion's going to get picked. I hope that he's on a good team, gets a lot of minutes and impresses. The All-Star game is always a huge chance to make an even bigger name for yourself. You're playing with all of the biggest stars. If you show out, everyone's going to be talking about it. So I'm excited. It's awesome to see a Pelican in the All-Star game. And we've had those almost for the last 3 years now with Zion, Brandon Ingram getting in alternating years. So very, very cool and very exciting. And it, even in the low moments in this season, we are still a winning team. We're still probably going to finish up as a top 3 or 4 seed if we can just get healthy at all. So there's only so low you can get when you're a team as good as us. And that is something I have to say that I truly appreciate, because I would feel like such a loser if I couldn't appreciate that we are in a better spot overall, even if our recent happenings have been pretty negative and pretty miserable. But that is going to be it for episode 10 of the Red Zone. As always, you can subscribe, follow on the platforms here. Feel free to like and subscribe to the podcast. Hope you enjoyed this episode. I will see you guys next time.